All right, roll the intro. Today we've got the Eight of Swords as the obstacle, and the Ten of Pentacles as the opportunity. So let's get started. Um, with the Eight of Swords, I was talking about in the short video that I just put out. I was talking about how I think this symbolizes a system of information, a theory, like like an abstract academic little world of words and ideas. We're not talking about the real world. It's its own system, like like I don't know, quantum, 11-dimensional string theory. It's an abstract. It's not just a single idea. It's a whole system, right? But it's abstract, and, I was, and it kind of made me think how often there are these systems that are academically very well designed and built up, and they've been distilled and polished, often for decades. There's a lot of these sort of academic systems of ideas that they've been around for a long time, and it's it's technically incorrect to argue that they are, that they are incomplete within their own paradigm, within the borders of their own little world. They are very, internally consistent. But often when these ideas get applied to, you know, things outside of their own paradigm, they get applied to the larger world. Which, don't get me wrong, that's one of the reasons we develop science and ideas, is so that we can use them to better predict the world. Now, as of yet, unless I missed, the big memo, there is no general there is no general theory of everything that explains everything, right? We're still using lots of different little theories to explain, and more importantly predict phenomena in the world, what's going to happen. But it's not like, there's no scientific system of knowledge that can actually at this point predict everything. So it's like not being able to recognize sometimes that the really well thought out, really well argued system of information doesn't actually fully encompass reality. I feel like that's the obstacle. I was talking to a friend of mine recently. Um, you know who you are if you're listening. And we were making plans. I was trying to make plans. A friend of mine is a hairstylist. And I was asking if I could get a haircut if there was, hair salons are closed right now. But I was asking, like, if there was, like, if I could get a haircut in the backyard, or, if there was some environment that would be relatively safe as far as she was concerned. And her answer was, she declined. And she said something that I thought was really, really interesting. She said, sorry, I can't do it right now. The numbers are too high, right? Like, and I feel like it's such in so many ways, it's such a normal thing to say that, like, it can often be difficult to realize that how of an interesting abstract way of, almost directly interacting with the world that is. It's like, it's not like there are actual numbers outside. You could look out the window and you could see the actual world. If, it'd be one thing if someone said, "Ah, you know what, I'm looking out my window and literally every single person walking by is like coughing and gagging on they're just gasping for air. I'm too freaked out," right? That would be like this kind of direct empirical evidence. but but this idea that the numbers are too high, it's like, obviously the numbers represent a real thing, and they are, I'm guessing, at least relatively accurate, right? Um, but yeah, I think it's really interesting to sometimes see the abstract systems of information as being interchangeable with reality in every way, right? Like, and I mean, this is like a lot of fucked up prejudices come as a byproduct of this. Like when people say, oh, well, statistically, people from this racial background get into car accidents more often. It's like, maybe that statistic is true, but to project that statistic on someone that you identify as belonging to that group, that creates a whole other thing, right? Like, but yeah, again, so I feel like the obstacle here is kind of missing out on the real world, being consumed by that perfectly balanced system of information. Uh, yeah, and then so the way to overcome this is just any sort of mindful attention that you could pay to the discrepancies between the two to help you remind yourself that like these systems certainly are there to help us navigate the real world, but it's there's a documentary that I always recommend to my friends called All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace. It's a really long title. It's an Adam Curtis documentary that he made for the BBC some years back, and one of the fascinating revelations in this, I think it's a 4-part documentary, is like the more that we employ machines to help us understand the world, and the more we convert the world, into symbols, into numbers and codes that we can feed to the machines, because you can't just go up to a computer and speak plainly to it. I mean, people are working on those kinds of programming languages, but at this point, if you have a computer and you want it to crunch some numbers, you can't just tell it to look out the window and get you statistics on human beings or something. It's like you have to feed it quantified information, and if you quantify, let's say, the behavior, the movement of traffic in the city, you quantify that, you feed it into a computer, it will be able to crunch those numbers much more effectively than any human can, and spit out some really useful knowledge, like, oh, you should change the stoplights, the green light should only last for 7 seconds instead of 8 seconds, whatever. Um, but in the process of offering up all that valuable information, the number crunching, that's coming out of the perspective of the machine and the machine's eye view of the world. And so like the machine is only recommending what it's recommending because it sees the world in a really limited way. And as we apply more and more of the sort of the products and the recommendations of machines into the real world, it creates this really interesting feedback loop of abstraction where it's like, in a lot of ways we're turning the real world into how computers and machines see the real world, which isn't, the full thing. I mean, human beings can't even see the full thing, but it's adding another layer of abstraction that simplifies things even more, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, so sometimes you got to be a little contrarian to fight against this kind of oppressing specter of data. You got to, sometimes you have to actively look for where those systems are wrong, to find evidence of it, and then that could certainly be a way of getting a little liberated from that, if it's like an oppressive thing that's keeping you down. And then in the opportunity, what I said about this in the short was how this is, how I think this not only symbolizes the completion of one's work or accumulation of whatever kind, but almost more importantly, it's like in realizing and being able to accept that something is complete, because a lot of people feel like they're never finished with something. It could be pretty much impossible to feel any sense of satisfaction with something if you never feel like it's finished, right? So I think that the opportunity here is in in first the ability to see something that you've been working on as being complete, uh, and then second, more importantly, being able to actually enjoy that completion, get a sense of satisfaction from it. Um, Now, sometimes, in terms of managing how you work on things, sometimes this just means, you've got a really big project that's going to take a really long time. Uh, Break it up into phases. Set yourself little sub goals so you could celebrate the completion of those sub goals. Even if something like, say you're working on some thesis. It's going to take a year to finish, right? It's like you don't have to put off having little celebrations. It's like if you commit to, writing for 3 hours a day, then every day after you finish writing, that's like a thing that you could be like, all right, writing session complete and feel good. Um, yeah, and I also kind of mentioned like feeling full after a meal, which is I think one of the simplest kind of examples of this. You eat the full course, whatever. The food is gone, the meal is complete, and now you're full. And whereas before you were hungry, and therefore the project of making the meal, eating the meal, whatever was real, was tangible. Now that you're finished, you're full. That desire has been satiated. You're in this really nice you're in this really nice place where, for some amount of time, possibly a very brief amount of time, but for some amount of time nonetheless, you want nothing. And I mean, one of the ways that one of the things that almost always contributes to not being able to fully enjoy and appreciate that sensation is because, like, sure, we just ate lunch, but we got like 10 other things we got to go today, and like those things aren't done. So it's easy to forget to like stop and appreciate, like, okay, here, little victory, delicious lunch, I am full. Like, just, you can just pause for like a couple minutes and just do nothing and just feel good with a full stomach. um but yeah, it could I totally get, like, it's really easy to, like, you finish the meal, well, now you got to get started on the next thing because you got, like I said, you got a bunch of other things to do that day. And then maybe you only stop, uh take a breather and appreciate all the work you've done at the end of the day when you've done anything. It's like you just missed out on like 7 opportunities to feel that pleasure, and appreciation of having completed the thing. Um, but yeah, so it's I think one of the opportunities there, and and I think there are a lot of activities, like almost like ritualized activities that often go really far back in in history, in all sorts of different cultures, but there's a lot of similarities. I think there's a lot of rituals that kind of contribute to being able to appreciate this. Often not directly, but the byproduct is still the same. One of the things that I like doing, I enjoy fasting, um, and one of the things with fasting is like that first meal you have after a prolonged fast. It's like it's amazing, and not even the feeling full part, but just it's like it always surprises me how, it seems like no matter how many times I've fasted and then have had that first meal, the break fast, um, that first breakfast, always, it's just such an amazing experience. It's, like it's been 5 days, 7 days, who knows how long, and it's just like I'll be eating, and it's just, yeah, it's mind blowing. It's like, oh man, food, right? Like all the flavors, it tastes so good, and like you just you notice the feeling of being nourished, and your body just feeling satisfied with getting food. And I always catch myself thinking, I get all like, I don't know, almost like nostalgic or something. No, that's not the right word. sentimental, but I always catch myself thinking like, okay, I never want to forget this feeling. I want to have this feeling every time I eat a meal. This appreciation for how good food is, and then by the next day, it's just like, eat the food, go do other stuff. But nonetheless, if you regularly engage in fasting and you kind of distance yourself from that activity, it's one of the simplest activities we do. Then when you get to do it, you can have that sense of appreciation. And I think this could be applied to any activity that could be immensely rewarding, but maybe you're doing it in a mechanical, sort of automatic fashion. It's at the point where you just do it every day, or it's become such a regular thing. You kind of stopped paying attention, interrupting that process for however long it takes to be able to appreciate it again could be something to consider. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for watching and listening. Drop me a like if you enjoyed the video, or comment free reading, please, if you would like to be entered for a draw for a free reading. It's the beginning of a new week, so there's 7 days, seven days worth of chances. Anyway, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Take care.